Life gets confusing. Classes get confusing. Dating is confusing. Marriage is confusing. Having kids is confusing. Teenagers having parents is confusing. Life is confusing. Jesus knew that as he was speaking in the Sermon on the Mount. Spiritual ideas, concepts, lessons, teachings get all confused from what God says. Matthew 5, verse 17, look at what Jesus starts out by saying after he finishes the Beatitudes and talks about light and salt. Our example. Do not think that I've come to destroy the law and the prophets. Stop right there. You see what he's saying? I'll bet you're going to get confused with what I'm up to. People are already mistaking what Jesus is saying and what he's doing. Some intentionally, some just because they're not sure, and some because they're not paying attention. Life is confusing. Following Jesus could be, but he's going to help us here. Now, verse 21. You have heard that it was said to those of old, and then he lists this one here, you shall not murder, and whoever murders is in danger of the judgment. But I say to you, and then he'll go on and give the remedy. Now, he'll use that phrase over and over in the next several verses. You have heard it said by these people, but I'm going to tell you this. And the reason he's doing that is because the people are confused. They've taken Old Testament teachings and they've turned them around in a direction that they want to instruct. So you've heard it said you can do this, but I'll tell you this. Look at verse 27. You have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I'll tell you this, whoever looks at a woman to lust after has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That doesn't mean literal. But he's on the road. But what they were saying was, oh, just don't go. You come right up to it. No, Jesus, I'm going to tell you different. You see how the world does, and Satan, is at the root of every bit of this. You can go this far, but just don't do this. Because he knows when he gets you this far, you're going to go over the ledge with him. And he confuses things more than anybody else. But we're the culprits, and we're also not only the culprits or the victims, but we are followers. We don't pay attention. So over and over, as Jesus is going through here, he's laying it out good and easy. You've heard this, but I'm going to tell you that. And so as he goes on through this process, he'll say in chapter 7, as he's closing out the Sermon on the Mount, this series is my take on it, of sermons that he's probably done, and Matthew kind of condenses it down as he's covering it. Not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, in other words, you can call me Lord if you want, but not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, is going to enter the kingdom of heaven, but only him who does the will of my Father in heaven. Don't get confused saying, okay, I'm going to call Jesus Lord. I'm going to say I'm a Christian, or I'm going to say this. I'm going to say prayers. I'm going to give. I'm going to do some things occasionally. But he wants more than that. Don't get confused. Don't let Satan lead you down that road. Nor let him lead you down the road to think, well, I can just do things the way I want. And I'll call that religion, or I'll call that giving, or I'll call that doing. Answer in verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these words or these sayings of mine and does them, I'll liken him to be the wise man. Talks about the one that built on the rock, you remember. And whoever hears, verse 26, these words or sayings of mine and does not do them, don't get confused. Life really isn't totally confusing. Satan only has a way of turning it around. Keep going back to that Genesis 3 passage with Adam and Eve in the garden. One basic commandment. You see that tree over there? Don't eat it. And Satan comes along and says, yeah, but it's good. And let me tell you why it's good. And he feeds her a line. And she listens. Now, does it make sense to listen to a snake in a tree? Or wherever it was? No, of course not. But that's about how we are when we stop listening to God and listen to anything else. Wise philosophers, good friends, teachers, preachers, whoever that says something different. They say this, but Jesus says, I say this. The ultimate decision for what to do that is right is always by what God says. Absolutely every time. I know on campus there are some teachers that will tell you in some of these classes there are no absolutes. I've sat in courses in college, in the upper grades, in the graduate levels that will tell you that. To which one of my teachers used to say, are you absolutely sure? Because if he is, then he's defeated himself. There are absolutes. Don't get confused. This is absolutely right every time. Now, as you look at this, and you look at your life, and you look closely, you might see a difference. Don't get confused and write it off and say, well, but live this, do this, think this, teach this, and heaven's yours. By God's grace and promises, we'll have to add, because we're not going to do it perfectly. Never will. But by a gracious God, we've got heaven for ours. But the whole thing is, we've got to be trying. We can't just, oh, well, I give it my best. Try that one on someone that really loves you. I'm sorry, I forgot our anniversary. What was it last week? I gave it my best. Or tell your kids, your birthday was last week? I'm sorry. I was busy. 5 years old? That's great. God expects us to grow up and act right and to live right and to want to do what's right. If you're not, would you do that tonight? Get your life right with God. If you've been away, would you come back and just say, I'm making a recommitment to the one I made some time ago? Oh, if you haven't done the one some time ago, being baptized into Christ, then this is a great time too. But don't get confused, thinking sliding by will be okay. That's Satan's gift. And passing it on to you. It's not okay. So while we sing a song, if you need to come, we stand and sing.